thank you for coming tonight. This, just to let everyone know that this is being recorded and will be on YouTube. And we will also be sending you, if you sign the sign-in sheet in the back, we will be sending you the PowerPoint as well. This year, and Omari Williams is in the back for those who don't know him, and I'm Matt Pisarski from the Planning Department. For this year, we've decided to change things up with the grant writing workshop. We've split it into 2 sessions. Tonight is talking about the narrative, and next Thursday we will be discussing the budget forms. A lot of you have done these applications in the past. We're at a point at this stage where the grants review panelists are tough critics. Let's just say that. And so we wanted to address what we feel is the heart of the application, which is the narrative. The narrative needs to be no more than 5 pages. The description is in your application. I'm going to get to that. But the challenge is to get succinctly the attributes of the program across in those 5 pages, address everything that the grants review panelists want in those 5 pages, and that can be a challenge. We recognize that can be a challenge. So I've thought about how we're going to do this, and what I've done for tonight is I've created 2 imaginary organizations. There's an arts organization and there's a history organization. All right, we're going to run through the different attributes of their narratives, all right, tonight. And then the information that's in the narrative is going to be in the budget forms next week, all right, because one of the critical components of these applications is that everything matches. So if you say in your narrative that you're spending $3,600 on a newspaper ad, just for argument's sake, in the budget, it should be obvious you are spending $3,600 on a newspaper ad. And in a lot of situations, the person writing the narrative is different than the person writing the budget. So, and that is very apparent to the grants review panelists because they do not align. And so it's super important that everything aligns, because that's the biggest red flag a lot of times for these grants review panelists. They read the narrative, explains the situation, maybe it's not totally clear, they get to the budget does not match up with what they're saying in the narrative. And so then they're in a quandary about, well, what are we funding? What is actually going on here? There is a lot of oversight on these grants. I have probably mentioned this before, but that is particularly true. There are some changes in this application related to oversight that we will address. They're in red in the application. So any changes are in red. Pay attention to them because that has come down directly from the county administration on things they want to see in these applications that have not been in the past applications. So we'll get going here. This is the cover sheet. The due date is October 13th of this year, not 2022. That's a typo. But 2023, October 13th. If you need the application or you need to discuss it in Spanish, we have a board member who will do that for you. Omari is the primary contact. We only need 1 copy, all the same as last year. Any questions on that? All right, this is the checklist and the signature page. These are unchanged from last year. Your application on the front should have the checklist with everything checked. For some reason you do not have it in the packet, you should put like a little note in there saying why it's not there. There are certain things that are only required for a GOS application, but they're noted. So you can just say not GOS or NA, but every other item should be in there. Signature page, again, we're looking for the contact information for the individual who can answer questions related to the application. So if you have a volunteer doing the application, don't put your executive director down as the contact, because then we're going to reach out to them and say, what did you mean in paragraph 3 when you said, and they're going to be like, oh. So as in past years, there are three possible funding categories: special request, special project, which is a one-time event; general program, which is multiple events in the calendar year; and then general operating if your primary mission is arts or history. You can apply for general operating to cover general costs related to your nonprofit, recognizing that there is a higher threshold of review for GOS applications. Okay? All the same as last year. Then there are 3 pages that discuss what we want to see in the narrative. I am going to summarize here, although you do see in red, we want photographs of previous events and activities as part of the application. It's a requirement. In addition, please provide any previously used marketing materials to ensure that the acknowledgement is on the material. So if you received funding in the past, we need to see the flyer showing the acknowledgement, and whether you are a first-time applicant or a repeat applicant, we want photographs of your programming from last year. That's a new thing. All right, so there are 6 components that we all want to see in the narrative. Brief history of your organization. Description of the program or project. An explanation of how the project impacts your target audience, both of which need to be defined. Summary of significant income expense components, so basically a short budget narrative. A description of your marketing promotional efforts, and a description of accessibility. Right? Those are the 6 things that should be in everybody's narrative. If any one of those 6 is missing, the panelists are going to strangle me. So please, no. All right, so like I said, what I've done is for each one of these 6 categories, I've done the actual narrative for an arts organization and for a history organization. So this is the arts organization. It's called the Maramore Society, established in 1978 for the mission of providing dance enrichment and education to children from kindergarten through 12th grade. Headquartered in Millville, the Maramore Society serves all of Cumberland and Cape May counties. Maramore has a governing board of 8 individuals, 4 from Cumberland and 4 from Cape May, and is staffed by a part-time paid executive director and 3 additional volunteer staff. In 2022, over 140 children participated in programming administered through Maramore. So what is in that paragraph that the panelists are going to be interested in? What information has been explained in that one paragraph? So we have an idea of the size of the target audience and who they are. They are children kindergarten through 12th grade, and last year 140 of them participated in programming. What else?
The area covered.
The area covered. So if the panelist sees that your mission is multiple counties or areas outside of the county, they may be a little concerned about your governance. They've explained. We have Cumberland and Cape May, and we have representation on our governing board 50-50. 4 from Cumberland, 4 from Cape May. So that would resolve any concern that the panelists have about governance for a multi-county mission. What else?
Describes the mission.
It describes the mission exactly. So the mission is providing dance enrichment and education to children. Simple. All right. It also indicates how old the organization is. It's been in existence since 1978. We know they probably have a pretty good track record if they were able to exist since '78. What else?
Employees.
Exactly. So you can see the staffing. They have 1 part-time paid executive director and 3 volunteer staff. So in that 1 paragraph, we know the mission, we know the establishment date, we know the basic governance, we know how they operate, we know their target audience, and we know the impact they had last year. Any questions on that? All right, let's switch over to the history organization. The Lexington League is a nonprofit organization serving Cumberland County and headquartered at the 1743 Mason House in Stowe Creek Township. Established in 1965, the Lexington League is founded on the principles of Jebediah Lexington, who believed the history of Cumberland County was slowly being lost to future generations. Originally exclusively interested in Stowe Creek Township history, the current mission of the Lexington League is to research, interpret, and promote the history of all of Cumberland County. The Lexington League conducts programming year-long at the Mason House and also partners with other historical agencies in an in-school educational history program in Stowe Creek Township in Greenwich. All right, what do we know?
Nonprofit.
It's a nonprofit.
They changed their initial so that if there was any preconceived concept, we're letting you know right now, we're bigger than what we used to be.
Exactly. So there may be some institutional knowledge on the grants review panel. Maybe they know a little bit about it. Maybe there's just an assumption, oh, Lexington's only interested in Stowe Creek. No, they've indicated they've altered their mission, amended their mission to represent and cover all of Cumberland County history. What else? We know they're open all year, right? And we know that they primarily operate out of their headquarters, which is the 1743 Mason House.
They work with the schools.
They work with the schools
Other agencies.
and other agencies, which means partnerships, so that's good. All right, so that's history of your organization in 1 paragraph. That's how you get it across. All right, so you would just apply that to your organization. You should be good. All right, now we move to the description of the program or project. For both of these, they're applying for general programming support, so multiple events in the calendar year. All right, Marimore is planning on a 3-month summer program to promote dance through a series of flash mob events in the business districts of the 3 cities in 2024. Volunteer participants will practice from February through May, and flash mob events are planned for Bridgeton, Vineland, Millville to occur in June, July, and August. Each municipality has been contacted and has confirmed interest in participating in this programming. Letters of support from each municipality are attached. The flash mob events will occur on weekends and are detailed in the previous section of this narrative. Cumberland County has a large and growing population of Spanish language speakers, and all posters and flyers are planned to be in both English and Spanish. A Spanish-speaking translator has been secured and will charge $500 for the associated translation costs. This expense is listed as professional services in the budget. Marketing also includes social media boosting costs of $300. This includes Facebook, currently 1,276 followers, and Instagram, 895. In the spring of '24, Lexington would also like to conduct generic boosting of its social media pages to encourage an increase in general followers. This cost is calculated at $250 and is included in the marketing grant request. While not directly related to the marketing of this programming, this funding will hopefully increase the reach of the specific event boosting later in the year. Radio advertising will occur on Wave 95.1 FM, which covers most of Cumberland County, and WEHA 88.7 FM, which is a gospel station geared to family audiences. The marketing in the Atlantic City Press includes 3 quarter-page ads, which will appear 2 weeks prior to each of the 3 events. All right, so we know what that money, what that $800 to Atlantic City Press is covering. 3 quarter-page ads, 2 weeks prior to each event. I don't know if that's particularly good or not, but we know that that's what the rate is for Atlantic City Press. We know what radio stations they're going to promote on. We know, okay, so does everyone understand there are different ways to boost social media? That you can boost a specific post or you can boost your entire page. So what they're proposing they do is, you can see their numbers are a little low, particularly on Instagram. But they're going to generically boost their pages in the spring. And they're including that cost in the budget. So, which is an eligible expense, that will hopefully bump those numbers up so that when they boost and post for the specific programming, their numbers will be higher and they'll have a further reach. Okay? So those are all eligible expenses under the grant budget. All right, does anyone have any questions on social media? Not that I'm an expert on social media, but we can try to answer them. Omari's better at it than I am. Does everyone in here have a Facebook page?
I have 4.
You have 4, good, okay. Does everyone in here have an Instagram page? Okay. Does anyone, by raise of hands, have a YouTube page? Oh, good. All right. So, just with a show of hands, does anyone have a TikTok page? You have a TikTok page. Wow, okay.
We had an intern over the summer that helped us get it going.
Okay, that's cool. Have you done any dances on the TikTok yet?
We did play streets.
Oh, good.
We went out to
Okay.
play streets this summer, yeah.
Great. All right, so socials are important. Web presence is important. But you can see here, they're really doing a shotgun approach. They're doing social media, they're doing newspapers, they're doing radio, they're doing flyers, they're doing English and Spanish. Very important in Cumberland County. And they've calculated, they found somebody, and it does not have to be, it could be a board member who speaks Spanish. It's okay if they charge you for that service. That's an eligible expense. If you, in order to translate it into Spanish, but they're telling us exactly what it's going to charge, what they're being charged, so we know.
That's a question that I had.
Yep.
So my vice president of my board, she runs integrity interpreting through the whole state of New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
If she interprets our show at
Right.
the Lavoy, like, she deserves to get paid for that because that's a skill
Correct.
that not people have. Am I allowed to pay her company for that?
Yes.
Even though she's on my board of directors.
Correct. So you should probably have something, either a motion or a resolution from the board that shows that she recused herself from that vote, but that it's a reasonable expense and she is a professional in that service. That's fine.
We've been advised to by a nonprofit attorney to have like an agreement as well, so that if in years go by that you have something that's saying, I agree as to offer this service at this price, and then it just goes in a file folder, and then if something goes
Mhm.
down, it's just clearly been there, as well as the recruising. We haven't had board yet, but yeah, it just, paperwork is good.
Yep.
Until
Yep.
I lose it. And it's
Scan it, put it in the cloud.
All right.
Newsletters are good too.
Newsletters are
To
excellent.
reach
Yes.
your base.
Yep.
If you could get people to give you their email.
Right. So, in a case where you have specific programming, what would you feel comfortable charging the grant related to a 12-issue newsletter?
Probably nothing, because we do it in-house at the library, and it's just part of our normal way to achieve some outreach with our patrons, to let them know what we've done and also what's happening in the future. And to, so we're just
Is
working
it a
on that as
printed
part of our-
newsletter?
No, it's an online.
Online,
It's
okay.
online newsletter.
Right,
And we
okay.
have them in English and in Espanol on our website, but we also take the time to send them out to our email
Good.
base as
All right.
well. And make sure, that when folks come into the library, they have the opportunity to give us their email. We always ask them, like with new card signups or anybody that just walks in, can we please add you to our newsletter so you know what's happening?
So if you were, let's say, you were going to, on the history side, because you can't pre-advertise a flash mob, but if you were on the history side and you had a 12-issue newsletter, you dedicated 1 month entirely to your Mason House programming, and there was a annual fee for SurveyMonkey or whatever you're using for your newsletter, you could submit 1/12 of that in your grant request because you've dedicated one newsletter entirely to this program. Okay? And you would just explain that. This is the total annual fee. We're dedicating 1 month's entire issue to this program. This fee divided by 12 is this amount. We're putting that in the budget.
Got it.
Okay? Accessibility. Marimore is dedicated to providing full access to its programming. While the exact locations for this flash mob programming is yet to be determined, all locations will be either on a public sidewalk or within a paved shopping complex. All participating communities were contacted to determine accessibility to their sidewalks on their main streets, and all include wheelchair access, including curb cuts and ADA parking in proximity. Dance performance provides an experience for both blind individuals through singing and music, and for hearing impaired through visual dance choreography. Our resident choreographer, Letitia James, has extensive experience in incorporating dancers with various physical impairments, and all dance routines will be available for dancers with disabilities to participate. Marimore has a standing subcommittee to its governing board related to accessibility concerns. This subcommittee meets quarterly and handles all complaints and concerns related to accessibility. Marimore has a board-approved ADA plan, which is attached to this application.
Just an FYI for everyone, my mission at Hands Up, as you guys know, is to encourage the deaf to learn more about the performing arts and encourage the hearing to learn ASL and interact with deaf peers. So as a deaf woman myself, hearing impaired is derogatory to our
Okay.
So just so you guys know, just write deaf and hard of hearing community.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, it's part of my whole mission is to teach the hearing more about the community.
Great. In this case, Marimore seems to have a pretty good handle on accessibility. So they've outreached to the partner agencies, the venues, right, in this case. So if you're going to use a venue that is not your own, you should do some outreach and ask them some questions on accessibility. In this case, the parking situation, the access for wheelchair, the various challenges are addressed. Additionally, they have a subcommittee in place. We know they meet quarterly, and we know that they have a board-approved ADA plan because they're attaching it to the application. All right. If you do not have a board-approved ADA plan, it's not the end of the world, but you should put something in there that shows the panelists how you're addressing access. Now, there are some applications that for a decade have said, we're working on an ADA plan. All right? That's a little too long. If you say you're working on an ADA plan this year, we should see the ADA plan next year. Okay? Yes.
When should an ADA plan be updated? Like, is there a number of years, like every 3 years? Or
That's up to the organization. I would say 3, 5, somewhere roughly in there. It depends on if there are substantial changes to your programming. You definitely want to update it. Okay? All right. The Mason House is a 2.5-story structure. While it is intended to have some interpretation activity on the second floor of the house, it is recognized that the second floor is not accessible to wheelchairs. If wheelchair-bound guests arrive, the coordinator will have the second floor reenactors come down to the first floor to a pre-designated location to provide interpretation. The exterior property of the Mason House includes brick walkways, and all outdoor interpretations will occur adjacent to these walkways to provide wheelchair access. As well, the parking area of the Mason House does not include a permanent ADA parking area. However, for this programming, temporary signage and demarcations will be provided for dedicated ADA parking spots. Large print versions of the passport materials will be printed for those who need them. Lexington is currently looking for options related to sign language interpreters, and based on typical costs found online, to your point regarding Google searches, the grant budget includes $600 for 3 days for a sign language interpreter at $200 per day. The interpreter will be on site should someone request this service. By providing both radio and print marketing between the two, both blind and, what's the correct term? Deaf community? Deaf and hard of hearing community are considered. All flyers and posters will include a notice on the accessibility options being provided. All right, so important components there is that the marketing, your flyers, your posters, identify and give some indication of what is being provided as service, which is important. They've taken into consideration the ADA parking issue. They know they don't have ADA parking, not the end of the world. They're going to accommodate. And I believe that that is an acceptable accommodation. In historic structures, it's often a challenge for wheelchair accessibility. In this case, they're going to make sure that all interpretation can be done in a space in which, if there is limited access, they can still experience all of the interpretation. Okay? I know certainly in your case that, second floor is not accessible, so you would have to do something similar if you were doing programming on the second floor, right?
If anybody's curious, the cost of, sorry.
That's great. Go
The
ahead.
cost of an interpreter is generally between $75 to $100 an hour, just in case anybody.
Okay.
And if anybody needs one, I know the best.
All right. There's your resource right there.
And we have video of our second floor. that we can
Right.
show.
That you can show if, exactly, that's another way to accommodate. Any questions on accessibility? All right. In the application, you have an activities chart. This is what the activities chart would look like for Marimore. So they have 3 events, June, July, and August. They don't have specific dates yet. Flash mob, it's going to be in Bridgeton, Vineland, Millville, they know that. And total attendance, they're just putting down as unlimited because it can be any number provided the space is accessible, which is fine. We recognize that this is a projection, so you don't have to have exact numbers. Now, current year 23, if you had any sort of similar programming, I would put it in there and give the actual attendance numbers so that we have some sense of what your programming typically attracts. Okay? Also, again in red, sign-in sheets should be kept for all activities where it is appropriate. These sign-in sheets should be submitted with the final report. That's new this year. So if you're having an event that has an entry. You know, the Mason House, certainly, they can keep a sign-in sheet of some kind. You can do it in a number of ways. You could take extensive photography of the event and then estimate the number of attendees. Or you could do some type of sign-in. If you have a ticketed event, there should definitely be a number there. So, you know, you would indicate how many tickets were sold. All right. On the Lexington side, they have 2 of the specific dates. One, they're not sure. And we know from the narrative that their cap is 400 people based on the property. So we know that that's accurate. Again, in this case, if they had programming at the Mason House in '23, it would be a good idea to put it in there for 2023. Pretty simple. Community chart. We recognize that the live audiences and potentially the artists and volunteers are not known at this time because you haven't had the event yet. You can put estimates in there, and in some cases, like in these 2 cases, we know a lot of the numbers. So all of these numbers were identified in the narrative. If you go back over the slides, we know there's a governing board of 8. We know there's a part-time paid executive director, 3 volunteer staff, 1 choreographer, a maximum of 10 instructors, 100+ dancers, unknown audience. All right? So board, executive staff, and support staff, at a minimum, should be filled in the application. All right? What do we know based on this chart about Maramore? Are they diverse? The board seems pretty diverse. We know that all the numbers.
Folks can't see that, so.
Right. Okay, so the board, we see seniors over 65, 6 of the 8. We have a racial diversity. They're all New Jersey residents. They're all adults. We know that we see the support staff. Actually, support staff, I moved the number wrong. This should be a 3, not a 1. And adults, I moved this over. When I failed. The panelists would red flag me right away.
Absolutely.
All right. But we do know that you're going to have 10 resident or 10 artists with stipends plus the choreographer. So that's 11 artists. We can see the only one you know is your resident choreographer. And Letitia James is African American. We know that all 11 of them are going to be New Jersey residents. That must be a criteria that Maramore has set, so that all the artists they select are going to be New Jersey residents, and they're all adults. They know that. So whatever you do know, you put in there. All right. On the Lexington side, maybe I filled this one out correctly. All right, we can see that the Lexington board is not as diverse. We know that the volunteers, it looks like, includes 4 children. So you have, if you remember back in the narrative, we had 2 paid reenactors. So those are the 2 artists. And then we had 7 volunteers, 7 on the outside, 7 on the inside. That's 14. So they know they're going to have 14 volunteers. So we know that the story is going to be diverse because you have at least 2 are African American, and 4 are children. So you know that the interpretation is going to include discussion of children in the family in the 17th, 18th, or the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. We know that some of them are going to be seniors over 65, so it must be a generational, they must be planning on interpreting generationally, which is interesting. That's what they know, that's what they're putting down. All right, so certainly at a minimum, your board, you should have that board line filled out accurately. Both of my board lines are filled out accurately, not the artist, but, all right. We do not have this in the application, but this is what basically we do ask in the checklist for a list of your board members, their terms of service, their officer titles, and other information. This is what we want to know. So your board list should have their name, where they're from, their occupation or avocation, and that should not include, quote, retired, right? So what are they retired from? Are they a retired teacher? Are they a retired engineer? What are they?
And this is a new form, right?
Well, this is not in the application, but you should be providing this information for your board.
And we can provide it.
We can provide
before
this
the
form if you
information
want
is-
it.
Right.
This is from Atlantic County.
We
So-
borrow from our neighbors.
But,
So do we.
all right, year term to end is, they're in an existing term, that term ends in 2025. So you could put 2025, you could put 2 years remaining, whatever you wanted to put. Total years on board is how many years they've been on the board for all their terms. And then the chair, the vice chair, the secretary, the treasurer, whatever officer titles you have on your board. Okay? Why would the panelists want to see this list?
Without a board, you're not a nonprofit.
True.
So you gotta it's a checks and balance of not just making it up here.
Right.
You have to show diversity.
You should have, the board should be reflective of the community and your target audience, basically. What other things could this show us? What happens if the panelists saw a board of 6 people, all of whom had
Same last name.
well, I'm glad you brought that up.
Nepotism. all the way.
Nepotism is an issue, so if the board is 6 and 4 of them are all in the same family, that's a concern, definitely. But also if all 6 board members have been on the board for more than 20 years,
Oh, yeah.
right? That is a problem, right? So we should be seeing, you can have some board members on there long-term. Agency longevity is fine, but you should also be bringing in new people. So you should have a variety of total years on the board. Okay? Yes,
And also the profession. You can't have like all teachers.
correct.
I'm not saying anything about teachers.
Nothing bad about teachers.
Or if they're related.
Right. But we need to see that there is some diversity. And regarding nepotism, certainly you can, there is the potential that you could have 2 members of the same family on a board. That's not the end of the world. If you have a majority vote that are interrelated in some way, that's a problem. Because then that individual family can control that board, which is a red flag. Okay? Omari is in charge of everything related to the re-grant program. So if you have questions or problems, or you hated the presentation tonight,
He's scooping out of the resume.
oh, I didn't. I
He
only.
left about 10 minutes ago.
Omari, what's your phone number? 453-217.
2175.
Do the 75. Yeah, 2175. You may have a different.
555.
Yeah. I started putting it in, and then
The phone rang.
Yep.
It was one of us asking a
Yep.
question. Do you?
So tell Omari all your problems. But we are certainly here to answer any questions. We want successful applications. I said this last year, we want to give this money away, but we are also under the obligation and expectation that the money is spent in an effective way and has a strong impact on the community. So we want to make sure that that is expressed in the application.
I know you're covering budget next week.
Correct.
Is it going to be going back to the match, or is it just because there was a few years there we left it blank? Or
So match,
No match.
there is no match again this year.
again, because years ago it was you had to have 50 or
Right.
more, and then
It was a one-to-one match, but that's set somewhat by the state council, and because of COVID and the challenges
Still.
related, they have not set that as a requirement again this year.
No, but it may come up. Both of those, the history and the arts grants we'll have to reapply as the county.
Mhm.
That's why it's so important for all these things. I'm trying to get these things cleaned up as we go to apply, so we can either get stable funding or hopefully increased funding, so keep your fingers crossed. And then the other thing I just wanted to say very quickly, Matt, was and I lost my train of thought.
Come on.
856.
Yeah, right. Oh, man. It just
All right,
went
it'll
out my
come
head.
back to you, love.
It'll come back. Go ahead, Matt. I'm sorry.
So, other things to consider. I think that if you cover similar to the examples in the narrative, that's the heart of the application. The budget workshop next week is about half the time that this one was. So,
No nachos?
I think you will have. Are we going to have food?
Something different, I think.
Something different, some type of food. Yes.
I am kidding.
Can we revisit the sign-in sheet?
Yes. What do you want to know about signage?
Well, we do multiple sites.
Right.
So you want to see the sign-in sheet that, as a report at the end of the grant period? Like all of them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
It's gonna be a lot
And
different.
well, that's so.
All right.
So that request was precipitated by an issue with certain organizations, not in this grant program, in another grant program, that said they were going to do something and then didn't do it.
Okay.
And so administration has real concerns about that. And rather than pursuing reimbursement of the funds, which is happening in this other program, we want to make sure that what was said in the application actually happened.
Gotcha.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's where that came from.
All right.
So it's none of your faults.
Yeah, please.
It's somebody else, but it is something that needs to be addressed. And so that is the standard policy for the county on all grant applications.
Okay.
but with ticketed events, I mean,
So ticketed events,
need to give you the dates.
no, you're gonna have photos of the event that shows a crowd,
Right.
and then in the narrative, you're gonna say we sold 800 tickets. So we can see 800 people in the
and
audience.
then the budget also shows the income of the event.
Correct,
Each
correct.
individual P&L.
Right. So, just how lucky you are in Cumberland with no match, Atlantic has a match this year.
Wow.
So, I think maybe they did last year.
Yeah, they have.
They never gave up the match requirement.
the state allowed us to, so I just.
Right. No, I agree, totally.
So they have to mark.
Well, if, and you'll see this in the budget forms next week, if you have a match or you're using some of your operating expense, show it. That's always beneficial, but it's not a requirement. Okay? And then, so the narrative and all of those expenses, we are going to plug into the 3 budget forms, and we talk about how all 3 budget forms match up, right? And it'll be quick and easy, and as long as your math is correct, we should be good to go. So Omari and I are going to stick around. Do you have anything else?
No, I was remembering what it was. It was the increased competition. So
Yes.
you might see some new faces in the room, and I just wanted to highlight that in both arts and history. Since I've been here, every year we've increased organizations coming in. So it's increasingly more difficult to be able to maintain the funding levels that we've had. So that's why I appreciate seeing all of you here in this room. Hopefully that you learned everything from that Matt gave you, because it's going to be a lot more stringent because we have a lot more organizations that are coming into request. So I appreciate that you're all coming back, and I appreciate that you're here listening, because there's a lot more organizations, even from last year. From the ones that have communicated to me, we have four more arts from last year,
Mhm.
and 2 more history than we had even last year. And the funding did not increase. We stayed stable, which is good from what we've received from the state, but there's more organizations. So I just want to make that incumbent upon you to really take this seriously with these applications, because it's going to be a lot more stringent this year.
Right.
That's all.
Okay.
Competition, right?
Yes.
Competition's a good thing.
Healthy.
Yes.
Arm wrestling.
All right, so thank you for coming tonight. Grab food on your way out. There's plenty.